We're going to go through a bunch of different ways you can mic your drum set to make it sound good, no matter what kind of gear you have or what your budget is like. Input-wise, we're going to be going through the most common types of interfaces with 8 inputs, 4 inputs, 2 inputs, and 1 input. And with each number of inputs, we're going to mic the set in a few different ways so we can see what kind of sounds we can get for different scenarios. This will hopefully be a little bit educational, as well as inspire you to experiment with what you have, or at least you don't have to buy the most expensive stuff you can find for a really good sound. In fact, for this video, I'm not even going to use the mics I usually use for my drum set. I'm going to use a hodgepodge of pretty inexpensive mics. For the overhead mics, I'm going to use 2 cheaper condenser mics that aren't even matched. Miking drums and finding information about miking drums can be pretty daunting. There's a lot of purists and gatekeepers out there. It's good to be precise, but these days, a lot of the things that people harp on aren't as important as maybe they used to be. And let's keep in mind that over the years, there have been many good drum sounds where the engineer wasn't taking out the tape measure or matching pairs of mics. Something that's really important to know is the way that we process drums matters a lot. For this video, I'm not going to cover EQ or compression or any other sort of processing beyond volume and panning. I'll make a video in the future about mixing drums, but for this one, I'm not even going to touch EQ or touch compression. Also, the sounds of your drums matter. Like, if you're not happy with how your drums sound live, then you're probably not going to be happy with how they sound recorded. There's no magic there. So, like, make sure your drums sound good and are tuned and you take care of them. Here's a whole video I made about how to sound good. You should watch that. Okay, so I'm going to quickly explain each setup as I'm doing it. Then I'll give you an example. I'm going to play the same thing for each example. And for this drum set, just so we know, I'm keeping it simple. Just hi-hat, 2 cymbals, tom-tom, snare, and bass drum. And this bass drum has no porthole, so I'm not taking any easy ways out. Also, I will be making a video all about bass drum miking technique with all my different bass drums, so subscribe if you want that video. We're gonna start right here. It's about earshot, audience perspective, maybe 6 or 7 feet away from the drums. We'll just see what kind of sound we get with one mic pointed straight at the drums. All right, still just one mic, same mic, but now it's just placed above the drums, about in the middle, just facing right down. All right, so this time we're at pretty much earshot, so we're gonna be right behind my head, kind of where my right ear is, just pointed right at the drum set. It should, in theory, sound like what I hear. All right, the one mic stuff's pretty much out of the way. I mean, with one mic, you're gonna get a sound you can work with, but it's gonna sound as good as one mic can really sound. Let's now think of people who have 2 input interfaces. We're gonna have 2 mics, and we're gonna try a few different ways with this. First way, since I already have this mic right here, we're gonna try earshot, but now with a bass mic as well. So I'm just throwing my bass mic in front of the bass drum, off center, a little bit to the left, maybe an inch or inch and a half away from the head, just so the drum has time to develop its sound before the mic picks it up. I don't want it to be too close to where I'm only picking up the sound of the resonant head. I want to be able to have more of the sound of the drum itself. So this one's pretty common. Bass mic in the same spot as it was before. We've moved this microphone to be a traditional mono overhead. All right, so for this one, you can still see the bass mic, but it is not plugged in, I promise. We're doing the traditional, just 2 mic Glenn Johns idea. So we have this mic down here, a little bit behind and to the right of the floor tom, about, I don't know, a foot or so from the floor tom, pointed right at the snare. And then equidistant away from that, we have a pencil condenser mic right above the left side of the drum set. Now, with 2 mic setups and even 1 mic setup, of course there are like so many more options. I'm just giving you a few options just to get the party started. Moving on to 4 inputs. The same Glenn Johns style from before. I've added a bass drum mic in the same position as it was before, and a snare drum mic, just a 57, pointed at the middle of the head, not too close to the drum, not too far away, just point and shoot. So this one's about the same as the last one, except I took the snare mic away and I put it right here underneath the ride cymbal, pointed kind of at the bass drum and snare-ish, not too close to the set, kind of a general drum set mic. And the theory is it can fill in some of the space that we might be missing. So we just have bass, same place as before. Snare, same place as before. And now we have two condenser overheads. Again, they're not even a matching pair. They're just the cheapest condenser mics I have. Stereo image, left, right, nothing too complicated. All right, now we're getting kind of weird with it. So bass and snare again, but the overheads this time are earshot, which I've actually never done before, but I got the idea from watching a Lewis Cole video. Both positioned right where I sit, right where my ears are, just pointing down at what theoretically my ears are hearing. So let's just see together what happens. All right, so the last of the 4 mic things. We're trying bass and snare, same spot, one mono overhead pointed down towards the middle of the kit, and then we're going to use this mic as our room mic in the same position that it was in at the beginning of this video. Again, with 4 mics, there are way more options than what we just did. So if you only have 4 inputs and you have 4 mics, try a bunch of stuff, experiment. All right, on to 8 microphones. So 8 inputs, that is my peak. That's how many inputs I have. So of course there's more options beyond this, but here we are. The setup that we have right now is what I usually do when I'm recording drums and what I've done for all my videos. So for this mic setup, you'll see I have 2 overheads, stereo field. I have bass in the front, same spot it's been the whole video. I have snare pointed at the top, same spot it's been every time I've had snare. But now I have each tom close mic'd, and I also have the bottom of the snare mic'd and the front of the bass drum mic'd. Again, I'm going to make a whole video about bass drum micing, but I don't have a porthole on this bass drum, so I get the sound of the drum that I want from the front, and then I get a little bit more of the articulation I can blend in on the other side, if I wish. Okay, for this one, all I've done is take away the articulate side of my bass drum. So I still have my normal bass drum mic where it's been, and I've replaced it with this as a room mic. So everything's the same, now with a room mic in the same place this room mic was before. Down here again. All right, things are starting to get a little squirrely, but we're trying new things. So I have my bass mic'd front and back now. I have my snare mic'd top and bottom. So I have as much control over those drums as I can. And then I have my first rack tom close mic'd. I have my left overhead stereo field. And then I have a kit mic where it's underneath the ride cymbal, pointed sort of at the bass drum, snare drum, just the general middle area of the drums. And then I have this one that I'm talking into right now. It's gonna be in Glenn Johns style, a little bit behind the floor tom, to the right of it, you know, the Glenn Johns thing. Let's see what happens. So yeah, if you have 8 inputs, there are so many things that you can do. You can do the math. I don't even know what kind of math to do for that. Of course, all of these scenarios can be tweaked with mic placement, like distance and angles, and everything will sound way better with EQ and compression as well. But hopefully this gave you some good ideas and inspired you to work with what you have. Like obviously having 8 mics will give you more control over your sound and maybe sound better than having less than that. But we can still get a really nice usable sound with less mics. So with processing like EQ and compression, all that stuff, it's gonna sound way better. All we did for this video was volume and panning. So everything sounds a little bit less polished than it can. The behind the ear shot microphones brought a lot of high end and clarity that makes sense, but I never even considered. And the microphone above the bass underneath the ride really filled the space in a nice way too. I kind of prefer those than the mics in front of the kit. And then Glenn Johns versus stereo overhead What an interesting difference. To me, the Glenn Johns setup had a tighter sound. My only thing with that is that I much prefer to have a mic on the floor tom if I can. So to have both the mic on the floor tom and the mic off the side of the floor tom for Glenn Johns is kind of like overkill. So I have some experimenting to do myself. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, please subscribe, and then leave a comment. My videos have mostly been like drum education content, so this is the first one I've done like this. Let me know if you want more of this sort of thing. Check out the description for links to my website for lessons. There's also a link to my Instagram, and there's links to my music, which, by the way, the song we're hearing right now is one of my songs recorded with the first 8 mic setup example.